Go.
Dance. All right. I believe we are live everywhere. So, hello, everybody. I am Edie Sky or HP Holo, depending upon which of my books you know me from. And this is Author Q&A, wherein I interview authors about their latest books. It's a pretty straightforward podcast. Anyway, today I have Casey Moores, whose latest book has released, yesterday? Was it?
Yesterday. Yep.
Yes. So you have a super new book to hear about, and it's No Fail, #2 in the Blood and Armor series, and I am going to let Casey introduce himself and his stuff. So have at it.
All right. I'm Casey Moores. I largely write military science fiction, some fantasy, a couple other things, some post-apocalyptic, military fantasy. I'm all over the place, but largely military science fiction. Most of my novels are with Chris Kennedy in the Four Horsemen universe. These Things We Do. Mess with the Bull, Unshackled, Has My Witnesses, Companion to Darkness. But then I've also got one with JTF 13 with Three Ravens Publishing, Witch Hunt, Civil War Marines Hunting Monsters. And then I've got a short story in that series as well. I've also got a post-apocalyptic in Chris Kennedy's This Fallen World series. I got The Gilded Cage, set at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and based on a short story in another anthology from This Fallen World. And then I've also just released No Fail. So those are my novels. I've also got, I don't know, maybe like 24-ish short stories out there or in development right now. The Four Horsemen, something else that I was trying to develop called The Death Mage Wars, like a World War I fantasy setting. You see those in a lot of the fantasy anthologies I'm a part of. Even got some romance out there if you can figure out what my pseudonym is, but I'm not going to give that away.
Now I'm curious.
Largely all over the place, but focusing on military science fiction, and that's definitely what this latest release was.
Yeah, you really are all over the place. So, which is to say, viewers, if you have something you like to read about, he's probably written it. So go read all his stuff. We've already got people in chat. It's Melissa. Hello,
and she knows my pseudonym because she was in that same anthology.
Oh, Melissa knows the secret name. I'm gonna have to ask later off screen. All right. So for those who are watching, first off, thank you for watching. We are also giving away a signed copy of No Fail. So I'm gonna put a link in the comments here. Go fill out this little form that has just appeared in the comments. And if you're watching on Twitter, you're gonna have to go to either my Facebook or YouTube because for some reason this comment is not reaching Twitter. Anyway. So there's that. Random. We'll choose a random winner at the end of this podcast, and then you'll be mailed a signed book. So go do that. So now we are going to begin. Well, we're going to talk about 2 releases. We're going to start by talking about No Fail. So Casey, give us the rundown. What is No Fail about?
All right. It is the second novel in the Blood and Armor series. The short version of the entire series is that the Kurds have achieved their own republic for the first extended time period in history. And obviously they're surrounded by enemies. The Iranians want to kill them. The Syrians want to kill them. Turkey is always bombing Kurds, and the Iraqis are kind of sour that they're no longer part of Iraq. So in Never Again, the first novel, the Iranians invade, shenanigans happen, hilarity ensues, and that resolves. In the second novel, No Fail, I'm going to have to give a little bit of a spoiler, but they survived that first novel. And now the Iranians have decided that they are going to, instead of trying to invade the Kurdish Republic, they are going to nuke it instead with the nuclear weapons that they definitely don't have. An insider contact, an intelligence contact, makes the Kurdish Republic aware that this is happening. And so newly elected President Timo Sheen is forced to send 3 deep strikes into Iran to the 3 different facilities where it is believed those nuclear weapons are stored so they can intercept them before they are launched towards the Kurdish Republic and end all life there and end the Kurdish people forever.
So it's pretty intense stuff. Melissa says
pretty intense. From the beginning, I think I'm going to say all the other novels have a little bit of a build-up. You know, there's some tension, there's some training, there's some growing hostilities. This one jumps straight into it. There's a scene at the beginning where they're capturing that they're basically obtaining this contact and obtaining this information, and then 2 scenes later, they're infiltrating 3 different locations into Iran.
Oh yeah,
and shooting starts pretty much immediately.
Yeah, I was reading it this afternoon, I want to say, and I reached chapter 2, chapter 3, and was like, oh, we're already getting crazy in this book. I love it. I love books that start that fast.
Yep.
It gets very intense, very fast, and it's a very easy read. And I like that too. Just despite all of the like explosions and craziness and detail going on, it's been a very fun read thus far. So yeah. So
It only spirals.
Yes, that's my favorite kind of book. All right. M.A. Rothman actually makes a good point. Says, and mention where you'll be seen in public for readers to catch up if possible. So are you doing any cons coming up?
I will be at LibertyCon, June 20th to the 22nd. I got a full schedule there. Panels, artist alley tables, all those things. The week after that, if anybody is in or around Albuquerque, I've actually got my very first real author signing at the Barnes & Noble in the Coronado Mall at Manal in Louisiana. So you can check me out there if anybody is anywhere remotely local. And then I'll actually be in Moriarty on the other side of the mountains on the 2nd of August. Trying to get into the Babanicon here in Albuquerque 2 weeks later. And then the next week I will be at DragonCon this year. I will not be there as a guest, but I will definitely be on some panels, and you'll see me at the gathers and things like that, hawking some of my novels. So
plenty of places to see you then.
Yep.
So, all right. So, on the Blood and Armor series, so the first one is written only by Bill Fawcett, correct?
Yes.
So why is the second co-authored then? How did you get mixed up in this writing adventure?
Here is the process. 2 LibertyCons ago, I guess that would be 2022, Bill Fawcett went to my publisher, Chris Kennedy, my primary publisher, Chris Kennedy, handed him a thumb drive, said, here is a thing I wrote. It's definitely a series if you are interested and want to develop it, but I don't really want to write the rest of it, so find somebody else that's really good that you want to write that you think you can write the rest of it. Apparently, Chris conferred. Kevin Eikenberry apparently suggested me. He was one of my early writing mentors when I was first into the Four Horsemen. Mm-hmm. So collectively, they suggested me to Bill. We talked it over. I read the novel. I was very interested in the project. Fell in love with it immediately. Loved where it was going. So, I signed on. I still had to finish off another novel in the Four Horsemen, Companion to Darkness. I was still wrapping that up. But once I finished that one, I jumped straight into No Fail. And the rest is kind of history. I mean, there was definitely a process, a journey of getting that book and the next book, and we're wrapping up book 4 right now, Melissa Olthoff and I. But that's how it started at the very least, was a thumb drive handed off at LibertyCon and Chris turning around and saying, have you met Casey?
Cool. So how many authors will be writing in this universe overall once it's completed?
It'll be 3 in the end. It'll be Bill, then me, and I'm sort of largely took the lead for No Fail and No Further. Mm-hmm. And now Melissa Olthoff and I are writing book 4, Forlorn Hope, which centers largely around a character named Nisty Khan that you might have mentioned, or might have met already.
Yes. Cool. So one question I have, I haven't read the first book, but I have found the second one very easy to follow despite that, which leads to my question, do the books need to be read in order, or...
They don't have to be. That's one of the things that Bill has been very specific on, that people should be able to grab that book off the shelf, not have any of the background, and quickly understand what's happening, what has happened previously. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you're jumping into No Fail, and it sounds like you caught up pretty quickly. No Further is largely structured that same way, a little bit of an introductory, and there is a little bit of spool up time in that one as well. With you obviously get the hints of what happened, what have happened, and hopefully that whets your appetite and makes you want to go back. We're flowing through Forlorn Hope right now to make sure that it's understood what's just happened when you start into that novel.
I like how efficiently written it is. Because there's some authors, when they write, they'll do these really, really long, drawn out, in the previous episode kinds of things. And sometimes I read those and I'm like, I just want to get to the main story. But I really liked how in No Fail, you basically have a really, really well-written paragraph or two that both sums up the first book, but also makes it sound really epic. and it's such a good little recap. And I love the way that's done.
I appreciate that.
So of the planning for this book, How much is was originally set up by Bill, and how much is stuff that you contributed in terms of the world design and the characters, for example? Or had he had everything kind of set up beforehand? And
he had ideas of where he wanted to go. And honestly, when I finished the first book and I said I was interested, he was like, we sat down, we chatted, and he said, I have these ideas for where it can develop. This is going to happen over here, and this is going to happen over here. Didn't even really have an order as to when these things were going to happen necessarily. There was sort of a logical progression, which definitely meant that some things definitely have to happen later. And I'm speaking as vaguely as possible for reasons, but obviously the No Fail could have been the second book. It could have been the third book. I think actually, based on how we did it, it could have actually been the fourth book in the end, when all is said and done. But, after conferring and talking about it, I decided that I thought at the very least that it made the most sense for that to be the next book, the next development, based on the scale more than anything else, because this is meant to grow and expand over time. Mm-hmm. And the No Fail story is very concise and very small. There's 3 small forces deep striking into Iran. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense.
One thing that I really enjoy about, I know we've said the book is intense before, but one thing that I really enjoyed about the opening in particular is you have a leader who has been told that their mission is very important, but they haven't been given certain details of it. And I really like the depiction of having to make decisions about an important thing without knowing precisely what you're getting into. It really depicts the stress of that kind of situation really well, and mm-hmm. how the kinds of decisions that a leader has to make. And I think it's a really, really interesting opening for that reason. Now, you have military background.
Yes, I was in the Air Force for 20 years. I flew special operations and rescue C-130s for 20 years as a co-pilot, then an aircraft commander, then an instructor evaluator. And that's actually what I do now. Retired, I am now a dirty contractor on the other side of it, instructing the next generation of special ops and rescue air crews. Mm-hmm. And that experience is definitely something I was trying to intone there. So thank you very much for commenting on that and noticing that. That really is, more than anything else, the military experience, and definitely the military leader or commander experience, whether it's an officer or a senior NCO or just the corporal that happens to be in charge of a squad at any given moment. Those are exactly the sorts of decisions and situations that they're constantly in. Do I, all the lives depend on me, and I have legitimate information, and I better not get this wrong, but I have to pick one because you can't just sit there.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I enjoy about reading military sci-fi that is written by people with military backgrounds, because there's a very specific way that military people have to think that civilians are never really in a position to experience, if that makes sense. Like I have no military background whatsoever. And it's really interesting for me to get those little sort of inside looks at the logic that you have to follow in these really, really fraught situations. And you can tell I've heard some people say that there is military sci-fi and there's militarist sci-fi, where it's kind of sci-fi with a military veneer, but it doesn't actually follow the actual military hierarchies and whatnot. And it's I don't actually know if that's an official genre name or just something whoever I was speaking.
This is the first I'm hearing of it. I just assumed they were alone.
Yeah, it's two different classes of military sci-fi, and it makes for an interesting distinction. But yeah, as a civilian with no military experience, I like those little deep looks into military stuff. But we got some comments blowing up here. Mark Stalling says hello, and so does Mr. Papadopoulos. And so yeah. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions for Casey, feel free to put them in the comments. We will get to them as we chatter. And again, you can enter to win a signed copy of No Fail. So speaking of military influence on your work, what part of other than the interactions, the hierarchical interactions that we spoke of, how else does that manifest in the way you write?
something that I've had to train out of myself and try and back away from, and it spills over a lot, is depicting too much of the planning and briefing. And I'll say that specifically maybe because more of my Air Force background, we spent a lot of time planning and briefing and rebriefing and replanning. And so you definitely get that. You actually don't get as much of that in no fail because, like I said, you just jump straight into it.
Yeah.
We're jumping out of a plane and here we go. But you see that in No Further, and you see that in Forlorn Hope. You will see that in Forlorn Hope. Earlier on, I think I realized in, I think my very first novel, I had spent way too much time on a briefing for one of the earlier missions. So that's something I've had to sort of reel back in myself, because obviously it kind of kills the action, slows things down, and becomes a little bit more of an info dump in the end.
Right.
But again, because of my military experience, that's how I think. That's the progression that happens, and that's what I'm trying to show. But I've had to teach myself not to show too much of it, I guess. In any other ways, that's the first thing that comes to mind. What was the question again? Sorry, we're saying how does
how does your military experience sort of influence and manifest in your writing?
I think definitely another aspect of it relates to what you were talking about, how it's all about those split-second decisions based on, sometimes it's not the right the best information. Sometimes there are several options and it's impossible to know which one. The fact that you have to choose one, and what that leads to is that sometimes those decisions won't be the best, and it doesn't have to be the perfect decision. It just has to be a good enough decision.
Right.
And then, when you find out that there were problems with that, you've got to be able to adapt and alter your plan to continue from there, to find another way. I opened that door and that didn't work. Can I go back out that door? I don't know. Do I have to smash through this wall to get to the other room, the hallway that was through the other door? I don't know. What are my options now? Did I tie myself into a corner? Can I get out of it? And again, that's another big part of the military experience as a whole. There are going to be failures and you have to recover from them. Not everybody is perfect, and that's one of those things that sometimes, and I'm not going to name any names whatsoever, and there's some very successful authors that do this sometimes, and I've done this myself, but sometimes you read things or you see things on TV where everybody always, the commander or the main character, maybe if they're not the commander, they always know the right action. They're always arguing for the right thing that needs to be done. And they're not being listened to, but they're always the one that knows the right answer. And that's never true. You think you might think and you may or may not be right. And actually, Melissa and I have been doing that with Nisty Khan. Melissa Olthoff and I have been doing that with Nisty Khan. And that she's definitely always thinking that she knows the better answer. And she's not necessarily always right. Sometimes she gets to prove whether or not she was right. Sometimes she just gets to think it, and sometimes she gets to find out that she did not have the best answer.
Right.
But that is how you learn and grow. That is how you develop, assuming that you can survive that mistake.
Right, got a few more comments for you. And Charlie says, "Hi, Casey. Congrats on the new release."
Thanks, Charlie.
And speaking of Melissa, she is in the comments and says that you are really good at hurry up and wait. Perfect is the enemy of good, and showing characters operating while really tired. Legit all around. I feel like all of those things are really huge parts of the military experience based on what I've read in general. So good on you. So now naturally, this is near future sci-fi. And I want to talk about the power armor because, yes, I love power armor. So tell us a bit about, is it pronounced GOG? Is the abbreviation pronounced
the GOG? Yep.
Okay, so tell us
General
about
Ordnance Garment. The General Ordnance Garment, GOG. It gets tagged that in Never Again when somebody sees that stenciled on the packaging or whatever when it's being delivered. What is a GOG? And then it becomes the GOG. And that is a play on mythology, if you want to dig into it, that will develop further, definitely in Forlorn Hope. But so the General Ordnance Garment was a DARPA project that was canceled by the DoD. And then as a means of destroying or getting rid of the suits, they are instead delivered to the Kurdish Republic, where billionaire benefactor Roger Tang of Tang Industries decides he's going to, basically take his ball and go over here. He's solved the problem for which DARPA canceled the project, and that is battery life. So all of the technologies involved in the GOG are at least conceptual, and a lot of them are very well developed, and actually they have on current day applications, or they're being applied in the current day. So the responsive armor, that is a real thing. It has not been used in this means before. Obviously, railguns are in development. Getting a railgun that's smaller than a Navy destroyer, that's, I'm honestly I'm not actually entirely sure where that technology is. That's one that I kind of took on faith, hit the I believe button, as we say in the Air Force sometime, and didn't dig into too much further. But a lot of the other things, the heads-up display and a faceplate, that's completely modern-day technology. Being able to cycle through different spectrums of imagery, entirely possible and true. The targeting system might be a little bit of a stretch, or at least one that's that accurate, but 10 years in the future, easily producible. The musculature, the fact that they're using more of a musculature rather than joints, and I think I honestly kind of mislead in some of my statements when the operator is hearing servos. That's actually their misunderstanding of how the GOG works, to be honest. There's a little bit of an unreliable witness, but it's more muscular, sort of musculature, more in how the battle mechs, actually, if you go into Battletech, that is actually what battle mechs are driven by, is more of a electrically powered musculature rather than joints and bearings and whatever, gimbals and things. So the battery life, that is a little bit of a unobtainium, whatever, hand wavium sort of development. But again, 10, 15, 20 years from now, who knows where that technology is going to be.
Right.
I did extensive research on real life combat suits, or real life combat suit systems that have been developed. The Russians have an entire series. They have the Ratnik suit, which you're going to see on No Further and Forlorn Hope, which is actually a passive exoskeleton, which means it's unpowered, but it's all meant to assist the body's ability to carry the weight and to travel around with all that weight without exerting their muscles or their joints too much. And there's actually 300 of those suits. We have not seen them deployed to the Ukraine for some reason. The U.S. had a Talos combat suit system, which also was canceled. And that was actually more meant to be an integration of a lot of different combat technologies integrated into a suit. It's not just armor with an exoskeleton, which is really the bottom line of why the GOG is awesome, is the fact that it's a real life exoskeleton with battery life that gives it more than half an hour worth of runtime, and that super impressive armor. But it is also the targeting, it is also weaponry and all those things. But a lot of it is real life technology.
That's really cool. I didn't realize that the technology was that far advanced already, even though it's not in very wide use. Or in development rather. That's really cool. Let's see. Oh, more. Okay. We got comments coming. Okay. Melissa says, hello again, Melissa. No strong female characters here. Nisty is very much a fallible, real character. I like that.
But still awesome. Awesome.
Yes. She is very awesome. Like, she's kick ass in the first scene, even though she's struggling to make or struggling is the wrong word. She's having to make difficult decisions.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Papadopoulos says, "You got my attention at power armor." Whenever you first emailed me about potentially appearing on the show, I saw the cover of the book and was like, "Heck yes, power armor, we're doing this."
I love those covers. Those covers are so awesome, and they did a really good job of capturing the GOG in those covers. Yeah. We had to adjust a couple things, but for the most part, they're perfect.
Yeah. And Charlie says, "Gog and Magog, awesome." And then
Magog? What was that other one? That's me flipping my sorry. That was me flipping my Fu Manchu beard at the mention of Magog.
And then Melissa again says, "I can't help but compare the GOG to that scene in Fallout where Maximus first tactically acquires his power armor. Only the GOGs look way cooler."
Yeah.
And then also says, Melissa's blowing up my chat this time. She says, Jay Caleb did an incredible job. Love those covers. He really did.
Yeah,
So,
oh yeah. Oh god.
yeah,
I
they are
love No
great.
Fail so much. Like Never Again was really good, and then I saw No Fail. I was like, oh my god, that was so perfect.
So now I have to ask, what's your favorite power armor sci-fi outside of your own, of course?
Oh, that's a tricky one because I kind of want. I kind of don't like it when the power armor or the combat suits get a little bit too powerful. Like to a certain extent, Robert Heinlein's were very, very awesome, but the way that he describes them, it's almost too much. But I mean, we're also talking about way in the future, and they're also fighting an enemy for which they're still well matched and it's balanced. But going back to BattleTech, it's one of those things that I read a lot of when I was growing up was BattleTech and the Elementals. I always thought were pretty cool. Something that's actually just a person in power armor fighting the giant battle mechs. There's so many other examples, but
yeah, there is nothing that snatches my attention like power armor. Well, I'm a giant robot person, so giant robots are up there too. But power armor is a very close
the giant robots are always awesome, but the power armor of the giant robots, and that's why like I said, BattleTech actually had that blend of them. No, it's the other one that keeps popping into my brain and falling out, and now it's going to be completely gone because I'm focusing too hard on trying to bring it back. But
there's also John Steakley's armor. Have you read that one?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. So honestly,
it's been a long time ago.
The details are fuzzy.
Yeah, I want to say it's been 10 years since I read it. It's been a while. The only thing I can remember about it was that I liked it, and there was power armor.
Yeah,
that's literally. Let's see. Oh, here we got another comment. It says, "Let me know when you're in the Portland area, and I'll buy you a drink or three."
No, I assume that's Oregon and not Maine. If it's actually either one, I wind up in periodically because Portland, Oregon is where my wife went to college, and we go out there periodically for this or that. And then Portland, Maine is where is not too far from where my grandparents had a cabin, and my parents have a cabin on a lake. So we sometimes fly into Portland, Maine. So either Portland. I'll let you know.
All right. So you primarily write military sci-fi, but you've got other genres that you like to work in as well. What draws you to those genres? Since military sci-fi is your primary.
I grew up reading military science fiction, but I also grew up reading fantasy. Loved like Dragonlance as an example. I think that was one of my first major fantasy series. And some Forgotten Realms books, lots of the D&D centered fantasy series. But so I've definitely got a big fantasy bent. Post-apocalyptic has kind of grown up over the last decade or two, and that's always been kind of intriguing. It's it's sort of like the future end of civilization westerns essentially, and I think I didn't really realize how much they were actually more of a western than any kind of like science fiction or anything, but they've got that sort of blend in there. So that's there's definitely appeal there. Romance I mostly did just because my brain created the story before I could stop it, and I was like, I guess I'm writing this now.
I know those kinds of stories. I'm working on like 4 different series right now in the background for that exact reason, because the ideas wouldn't let go.
Wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah.
I do love alternate history. I love Terry Turtledove and some of the other big alternate history writers, but that is someplace I'd like to get into. Sorry, Eric Flint. I love the 1632 series, and if I had the time or wherewithal, I would love to dive into that. But I can only have so much time. I still got a full-time job. I still have 2 kids, or that mid-range of lots of sports and all those things that we're driving around to. So, yeah, I've definitely got the notebook full of ideas, but it's all a matter of when I can get to that. And I can only focus on one thing at a time. Maybe take a break for a short story here and then.
One of the biggest problems about being an author is that you always have more ideas than time. It's so infuriating. I mean, it's great to have that many ideas, but it's like I'm never going to have time to write all these. It's kind of depressing.
I need to find that pocket dimension where I can slip away, write for a little while, and come back, and it's the same time as when I left. Still looking for it. I'll let you know, and I won't let you know when I find it because that's going to be marketable. Sorry.
I would buy it. I would rent space in this alternate dimension. I totally would. All right. So next question. On no fail. First off, what was the most challenging part to write? And then what was the most fun part to write?
Ooh. On challenging, and I think this is where I tripped over myself, and I spent a lot of time doing research and pinging this off of people. And in retrospect, it probably was a lot easier than I thought it was. But writing the bunkers, there's all three of them have to break their way into and fight their way through bunkers. And I think I kind of stumbled over that a lot, trying to make all three of the different bunker assaults different, and three, just determine how to write how they were doing that without sounding like an Air Force guy trying to write tactics.
Mhm.
So that might have been part of it. The most fun, and I said last night on Jeremy's podcast, on the Inside CKP podcast, that I probably shouldn't say this out loud, and I still shouldn't, but I'm just going to tell the story from now on anyway. And hopefully the Air Force doesn't fire me, but because I definitely got good actual instructor upgrade training out of this. But I, as part of my job, I upgrade previously qualified pilots to instructors. And as part of that, they have to give us ground training, and we play a stupid student and we ask questions and we don't know anything, and they have to impart the knowledge onto us, as they will have to do in the future, and as we do to them as our full-time job. So this instructor candidate walked in one day and was supposed to give me ground training, and I cut him off before he opened his mouth, and I said, "I'm not sure what you planned today, but today, you are going to teach me how to do high altitude, high opening airdrops, presuming that maybe you're on, say, I don't know, a commercial aircraft flying over this commercial airway in Iran, and you want to get to this location. And you weigh this much, or like each one of the individual troopers with all their equipment weighs this much. How do we plan this? Teach me." Which basically planned my scene for one of the infiltrations. We figured out what chutes we were wearing, what the oxygen requirements on, pre-breathing, wind drift distance, all those things, how far we can get, the effect of the wind on the way down to how that would limit landing here versus landing here. Planned that all out. He gave me great instruction. It was also a good learning point for him to be ready to jump into a situation and teach whatever. So
that is a spectacular research.
I mean, we legitimately then went through all the regulations and publications and all the Air Force procedurals as to how that would play out, and I threw all that part out because that doesn't matter to me. But
was this the fun part or the challenging part? Or both?
The fact that I was able to use my job to do that was the fun part, and honestly, planning that drop was a huge fun part because that was something that I'll say I was trained to do and may or may not have ever actually done in my time in the Air Force, but planning that whole infiltration out was the most fun, planning that one out of the three.
Cool.
So yeah.
You have a favorite character that you enjoyed writing?
I fell in love with writing Nisty Khan in that one, but I mean, all of them, and then some of them even surprised me. They popped out of, one of them just happened to be, you've already met Siresk Maradi, who is Hermi Karzan's friend, as they're marching on one of the infiltrations. He winds up fairly prominent later on in the novel and has some of his own scenes, and actually I then carried a piece of the character, I'm not sure how to phrase it, into No Further. So all of them, really. I mean, I created Kazi Shanadere out of whole cloth, and then I started writing. That actually happened because for that whole thread, I started writing out from Colonel Cardo's perspective, and Bill told me early on, and he was right, that it was very dry because I was writing it from a colonel's perspective, and it was all very kind of bland in a way. It was boring, and it was very after-action reporty, and so switching it over to the medic's perspective, I'm actually so glad that we made that decision early on. because you get so much more of the grit and realism and the worst parts of every aspect of both the deployment, the combat. He's the Dr. McCoy listing all the things that can go wrong in his head as they're about to jump out of a plane at 25,000 feet.
Mhm.
We're going to run out of oxygen. They could freeze to death up here if something goes wrong. If their chute doesn't deploy, if they drift too far.
Right.
All those different things are going through his mind because that's his perspective.
Right. Let's see ahead.
So.
What other questions do I have? We're having fun. We're only halfway through. This is fun. All right.
Sorry, I'm talking too fast.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm excited.
I talk crazy fast as well, so you're in good company.
Right.
So again, I mentioned it's far future, or not far future, near future sci-fi, and we've got the power armor. Are there any other sci-fi elements, or did you pretty much limit it to the power armor?
Largely just the power armor and upgrades to that power armor. The existence of railguns, which get incorporated in the power armor. In the first book, Never Again, the GOG suits have the railguns, but there are also standalone railguns that they're deploying and testing and using in the beginning of that novel. So outside of the railguns and the railgun incorporated, the GOG suits as a whole, not really. Like I said, in No Further and Forlorn Hope, I delve into real life versions of combat suits. The Eradicate, the Sotnik, the Legionnaire, and then I made up a few that other countries might have developed by then. One of them is actually based on a real exoskeleton that exists, but those are all developments of things that really exist today. Their method of communication is also a little bit of a stretch, and I actually had a very extensive discussion with a former comm guy to discuss how we could play that out, and that how in No Further and Forlorn Hope that actually becomes exploited as a weakness and then immediately countered. In No Fail, you learn of the Co mini drone. It's actually pronounced Co. If you get the audio, it's going to say Q because I never gave the notes, and that's my fault entirely. But in that area, it's pronounced Co. But that's the little mini drone that launches from their shoulder. But obviously, that's not too big of a stretch for what we got going on right now, and especially a decade plus.
Oh yeah, drones have come crazy far in the past several years alone. Cool.
So no, the suit really is the largest extent of the military science fiction aspect of it. Everything else. I had on my internet tabs, I had the list of military equipment of the Iranian army open the entire time I was writing that. And when I moved into No Further and Forlorn Hope, it was Russian equipment and Syrian equipment. Those tabs were just eternally open on my browser, so I could just click over and grab a vehicle or grab a weapon or whatever. So
it's a good idea for drafting. Here's a question for you. Now, it's very easy for authors who have to do a lot of research and who enjoy doing research to just fall down research holes and not actually get writing done. How do you structure your research process so that you don't just get distracted? Because that's something I run into. Like I once did 3 hours of research for a single sentence and ended up not even using the research in the sentence. Like it was just procrastination at that point.
I'm not sure if I have an answer to that. That's probably why both No Further and No Fail both took 8 months each, when 3 to 5 months is kind of my average on all my other novels, to be honest. So and that was just one of many. I had a lot of research rabbit holes, and it was everything from location to types of equipment to, like I said, tactics or contacting a buddy and asking how this or that works. Everything from imagery. I actually got in touch with a restaurant here, the Kebab House, that sells Persian and Kurdish cuisine, and I interviewed one of the people that works there, and we've interacted since then about Kurdish culture and how I could integrate that a little bit more. So I'm not going to lie, the research is constant, pervasive, and I also, a lot of people will use placeholders, and actually that's something me writing with Melissa and I writing together. Melissa will just charge ahead, and she's been our workhorse on this, getting the words down there. But I'll go through, and she'll just have brackets, Casey, insert a gun, Casey, insert a vehicle, Casey, insert whatever Kurdish name. I don't care. Whatever. Lieutenant, what's his name? Casey, fill in the research blanks.
I should honestly do something like that when I write. Of course, my stuff generally doesn't require a lot of research. I just make it up off the top of my head. It's all fantasy. But and Melissa's back, and she says that the amount of research, legit non-procrastinating research Casey has done for this series is amazing and freaking humbling.
Yeah, but to finish that up, I mostly don't use those placeholders. I generally jar myself out of the scene that I'm writing, look it up, because that is actually how I attach myself to that scene most of the time. Sometimes it's not that important, and sometimes I can just grab a gun and shove it in there, so to speak, and I can just grab a vehicle and write from there. But even when I'm grabbing, say, a vehicle, I have to be able to describe it, and I have to I dig into its capabilities and what weaponry it has and what kind of armor it has, so that what angle of shot and all those things is realistic, so I'm not shooting the front of a tank and saying that it worked. Stuff like that. So to me, I could not complete those things unless I fully understood what I was writing about, because I had to make that real. But once I did understand those things, it kind of created the scene for me and made it easier in the end.
That's cool.
So
all right. So all this to say, this is a really good book for people who like power armor and well-researched military sci-fi. So we're actually going to change gears entirely. Well, maybe not entirely, because we're still talking sci-fi right now. But one of your other most recent releases was a short story in Down These Mean Streets, which was a Baen sci-fi noir anthology.
It's sci-fi, urban fantasy. It's a blend. It's the whole gamut.
Oh yeah, it's kind of
it's all the noir.
So first off, tell us about the anthology, and then tell us about your story in it.
Then the anthology is actually the third noir anthology by Larry Correia and Casey Ezzell, and I can say with confidence that it was entirely Casey Ezzell's idea, and she presented the idea to Larry Correia at a LibertyCon years ago. They created Fatale Noir. Noir. Fatale Noir. Noir. Sorry. Thanks, Mark.
Say noir. I can barely say it once.
And then I believe it was No Game for Nights. Yeah, No Game for Nights was the second one. And the third one was Down These Mean Streets. I had not very... So, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, all three of these are from Baen. You have so many publishers that you work with.
All three of them from Baen, yeah. And these are Down These Mean Streets is my first Baen credit. I'm very proud of.
Yay!
So in Down These Mean Streets, the assignment was a noir story in which the city is an intrinsic character. I think that was.
I love those.
I think I'm saying that prompt right. And reading everybody else's stories, apparently that was interpreted a lot of different ways. A lot of people created their cities, or it was a fantasy city in the universe that they were writing and things like that. But for some reason, my brain wrapped around the fact that I had to pick a city somewhere, that it was going to be a character in the story. And honestly, for a while, I was writing this plan to put a story in Las Vegas and do that. But at some point, something clicked, and I was like, I'm writing Albuquerque. I am writing Albuquerque. I am showing the world Albuquerque. And honestly, the funny thing was, the story is called Central After Dark. And anybody who has been to Albuquerque and gone down Central After Dark, Central Avenue, Old Route 66, after dark, can attest that story wrote itself.
I have never been to either of these.
You wander down that mean street in the darkness, and you'll see strange things.
Cool. What kind of strange things? So what's the story overall about? So we know it's about the city as a character.
The city as a character. The story starts on one young man's wedding night, and he has just left the hotel where they're starting their honeymoon after the wedding, from a horrible knockdown, drag-out fight with his recently married wife. And he escapes the hotel. He actually has to dodge one of her brothers to get out, and then he just goes for a walk to clear his head. And a couple blocks away, he finds himself on Central,
And then, like I said, some weird things start happening. He sees a coyote cut across his path, which actually is kind of completely normal. An owl staring at him, which is also totally normal. So I guess I'm getting there. He stops by a burrito truck that happens to be open in the middle of the night for the guy that he knows, who offers up one of his special burritos. The main character refuses that offer, but it's still kind of nebulous and unclear whether or not he actually got one of those special burritos or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then continuing down Central, things kind of degrade and escalate. He sees a strange thing engaged in a fight with the coyote that he saw. He rescues a homeless person from an attack by another strange thing. He sits down at a bench, and one of Albuquerque's more colorful characters, Don Schrader, just happens to sit next to them, and they have sort of this little philosophical chat. And the man just sort of disappears when he's done talking to him. That's actually a real person, by the way, and I hope I hope I never get in trouble for writing things that he said, but or making up things that he might have said. But and then he also sees ghostly figures in windows, has encounters with a gang banger as he starts getting a little bit close to downtown, and then winds up ultimately in Old Town, where just before there, his wife meets him just before he goes into a very strange, mysterious house, and then she sort of redirects him to Old Town, and that's where the climax of the story happens in Albuquerque's Old Town, where the old Spanish mission was, where there's actually a very wonderful restaurant called the Church Street Cafe, if you're ever in Albuquerque. So
I'm gonna have to pick this anthology up. I think I'm reading the second in that anthology series right now, so I haven't quite made it to the newest one yet.
All right.
But got a comment here. Howard Cohen says, "I've read the story and anthology and really enjoyed it."
Thank you very much, Howard.
Tropina Veteran says, "Hey, cool cats."
Hey.
So, all right. Now, I love stories like anthologies. Like, they're groups of stories, of course, but they always seem to come with fun stories in and of themselves about how people got involved in them. So, how did you get involved in this anthology, especially since it's your first Baen short story?
I'm gonna claim nepotism through Girl Casey. So, because I am Boy Casey. If you ever hear her referred to as Girl Casey, that's because I'm Boy Casey, and we were actually named that by a 3-year-old at the time. Long time ago. I knew her at the Air Force Academy way back when. She was actually dating another cadet who was from my hometown, so I knew him, and therefore I met her at some point. I think we bumped into each other in pilot training. We were in pilot training at the same place for a little while, and then there was a lot more story after that, a whole lot of story. At some point, she basically became family, in the modern day friend vernacular of the Vin Diesel family.
Yes.
Yeah. So she is also the one that got me writing, as she got many other people writing.
Oh yeah.
But we actually, she and I used to write together way back. We used to write Vampire the Masquerade fanfic for a LARP that we were doing in Albuquerque when we were here for training way back when, and a few other things. Yeah.
So was fan fiction where you started writing in general, or had you written other stuff before that?
Yeah, largely, but also before it was called fan fiction. Like this, we're talking, I used to write BattleTech stories way back when. And then in the early 2000s, I think this was like 2001, 2002 timeframe, that's when we were writing Masquerade and Vampire the Masquerade stories together. Right. So, yeah. Yeah, the other thing is, honestly, that was very early in my Air Force career, and there was kind of about, I'm going to say, a 15-year period when I really just stopped writing altogether. Just because my job, life kind of had other things to focus on. My favorite mech. I kind of waffle on this one, and I have to decide whether or not I want to pick a clan mech or an old school. It's also been a while. The Warhammer was my favorite for a long time. The Mad Cat. I generally like the heavies, like the 70 to 75 pound range generally. Yeah, sorry, I completely got interrupted by Jared asking Boy Casey what is his favorite mech.
For those who are audio only, there's a question in the comments asking, Boy Casey, what is your favorite mech? John Osborne says Clan Timberwolf.
Oh yeah, well, I was actually Steel Viper just because I love the name, but they were also kind of very minor. They were very minor, but it was also, I'm gonna say, we're losing words. Like artistically, Steel Viper and some of those smaller clans lent themselves to a whole wide universe of I can write anything because nobody knows what the hell they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost want to like run away and come back 2 or 3 minutes and just leave a blank screen here while I go grab it. But I have this manuscript that I wrote when I was in high school called Taurus, where I created a 100-pound mech named the Taurus. And apparently I wrote a story about it. Like, I don't even remember that I wrote a story about it, but I wrote a story on my old Commodore 64 and printed it out. And and I haven't even looked at it. I'm kind of afraid to.
Oh yeah, I have. I actually kind of regret doing this, but once I started heavily writing when I was like in 4th or 5th grade, and then at one point when I was a teenager in late high school, I rediscovered that old writing and then burned it because it was so bad. And my adult self I really regret doing that as an adult because I wanted to see like what my little 4th grade brain was thinking. And I fortunately I have stuff that was written after that I've still preserved. It's still terrible, but it's encouraging to see how far I've come.
Yeah.
Since writing anime ripoffs in and so it's cool to see how authors develop in terms of where they started writing and how and just their entire author journey. It's a really interesting topic to me. But let's see here. We've got more comments. As for John Osborne is saying his favorite clan is Ghost Bear.
I like Ghost Bear. And actually I did have a story that I had started writing about Clan Ghost Bear.
Cool.
Way back. I don't remember much about it, but I completely ripped off of the Jade Falcon, Jade Phoenix, and had like a Phantom Grizzly or something as their mythology. But, yeah.
So when you sit down to write, do you have specific writing times or rituals or anything like that you follow, or can you just basically sit down anywhere and go at it and make words?
Because of my life, it's kind of just a mad panic whenever I have free time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my work schedule is shifty every day. Last week I had to show up at 5 o'clock and start at 5:30 and teach until 12:30, I think, and then at 1 I was done with my paperwork and I went to this little hidey hole I have near my office where I just hole myself away and cut off from the world and start writing. And even then sometimes I have trouble getting into the zone. Sometimes if I got a quiet house to myself, if anybody is home, there is no chance I'm writing whatsoever. But but most of the time I'm just finding margins in between classes that I have to teach, or at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day at work, really.
Got a few more comments here. Going back to the giant mech description, the 3rd Robotech war in Robotech had human-sized cyclone motorcycles that transformed into mech armor and were used to fight giant alien mechs. So yeah,
I definitely loved the whole Robotech series. I have all of those on DVD.
And Mark Stalling says, "I love that series. I need to go rewatch Robotech." It occurred to me recently that I've there's several different versions of it. I've seen Robotech, but it's actually cobbled together from like 2 different Japanese shows. And I think there's Macross, which I actually have on my DVD. I have on my DVD shelf, but I've never actually watched it. It was a series that my husband contributed to the DVD collection. So that's one area of mecha stuff that I need to delve into because it aired like right before my generation. And
that was entirely my generation, yeah.
Yeah, the main reason I watched Robotech at all was because I had a really cool art teacher who trusted me enough with her DVDs to let me watch them. And so, yeah, and so I watched it and loved it. But yeah, well, we are getting close to 9 o'clock, so it's just about time to wrap up. So all that said, thank you for joining me tonight. This was a whole lot of fun, and everybody needs to go read Casey's books. So again, No Fail is the one that just came out yesterday, and then there is Down These Mean Streets. And let's see here. And okay, our Haley actually has a good question. If you write a mech story, does it mean your hobby is tax deductible?
Do you know how many times I've tried to get into the Warhammer 40K Black library on that exact premise?
Yeah, yeah. And that's something I actually have been curious to ask my tax guy, because there's so much of my stuff. Like I don't think building Gundam models necessarily contributes directly to what I write, but at the same time,
They're writing
some
giant
things
mechs,
that
I
are
mean,
kind
giant
of
robots.
there are some things that I do that are kind of like, well, they do contribute to my writing in a very direct way, but is the IRS going to look at this and be like, what? So, so yeah. But anyway, thank you for joining me. Thank you, audience, for joining us. This was all a lot of fun. And if you will, just once again say where we can find your stuff, any other cool stuff you got coming up, con wise or book release wise or anything.
Oh well, the next book, No Further, comes out at the end of June. I think a week after LibertyCon. A week or two after that, I'll have to check the date, but the Bureau 42 anthology from then the Four Horsemen universe and Chris Kennedy Publishing, another Peacemaker anthology about basically the cold cases of the Peacemaker Guild. Let me look that up real quick because there's a whole lot of traffic, and it is coming out July 12th. You can see Bureau 42, and I have a short story in that. And then in August, you'll get Forlorn Hope from myself and Melissa Olthoff, the fourth novel in the Blood and Armor series. I also have, I'm going to say like 5 or 6 other short stories that are out there, but I don't know their publication dates yet. Everything from, I think I've got one from the Fantasy Schools series. I might have another Baen story out there, but I don't want to say anything until that's, resolved. And then a few others from Three Ravens Publishing. So you'll definitely see more short stories out from me in the future. So yeah, 1, 2, 3. You just got book 2. You're gonna get book 3 in a month. You're gonna get book 4 a month and a week or 2 after that. As for, I'll restate where you can find me. I'll be at LibertyCon. I'll be doing a book signing here in Albuquerque at the Barnes & Noble in the Coronado Mall. The week after that, on June 29th. June, July. Summer's disappearing already. 2nd of August, you can find me at the mini Moriarty Con in Moriarty, New Mexico. And then hopefully Bubonicon 2 weeks later. And then Labor Day weekend, I'll be at Dragon Con. Beyond that, I don't know. I can't see that far in the future. So.
Well, I just put the link in the comments again, but you can enter to win a signed copy of No Fail, so don't forget to do that. But also, we did have one last question from Charlie Cox, who asks, are there any future Fallen World novels coming up?
Oh, I still want to continue the story of Tyrone and Kid from The Gilded Cage. There is more of that story to be written. It's just a matter of when I can get there. I actually invited another author of that series to co-write the development on that. Because one of his short stories ties very closely to how that storyline can develop. So when I find that pocket dimension and slip in there and write another novel.
We all got to find that pocket dimension. Whenever you find it, you need to let all the other authors know so we can come hang out there and be extra productive.
For a prize.
Yes. You gotta,
or through altruism. I don't know. Maybe I'll be altruistic at some point. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling at the time. It might depend on my mood.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will see you next time.